We work with tobacco to facilitate connection and to move energy through the body while we pull the energy of the tree through the system. Tobacco is like a very refined scalpel going straight to these truth moments or truth consciousness or self-realization spaces within ourselves to see what is hard for us to see. And tobacco unlocks that and then opens that space. And then in that space that's open, the tree comes through and it starts to bloom inside the body and it starts to grow inside the body and it starts to teach its actual consciousness as it comes more through the system. Sequoia we work with is the eldest of the three sequoias on Earth. There's the giant sequoia, there's the coastal redwood, and then there's the Metasequoia. And the Metasequoia was thought to have gone extinct. So we knew of it from the fossil record, and we thought that it went extinct something like 60 million years ago. And the Metasequoia kept walking south over millions of years and was found living in China in the 1940s. And only a few hundred of them were found living. So the tree's been evolving for a few 100 million years. The tree reached its peak evolution in the Cretaceous period.
Hello and welcome to Elevated Conversations. In this conversation, we go deep with Jordan Mockingbird. Jordan has specialized in working with the master teacher trees. Now, we've talked about master teacher plants, ayahuasca, mushrooms, etc. on this channel before, but in this particular episode, we're talking about how he has learned to use ancient practices to connect in with the energies of sacred trees. He talks about his connection to the sequoia tree in particular and the infinite wisdom that we can get from the tree and how it can actually guide us and help us to remember more of who we really are. And of course, the wisdom and love and connection and oneness that the tree has that we can embody into ourselves. And he does this via retreats, which are coming up, and we unpack in detail in this conversation. What do you actually do on a tree diet retreat? How does that work? What benefits you can get from it? And how to actually then take this home and apply it in your day-to-day life. Hope you enjoy this conversation, guys. Jordan Mockingbird. Hey, Jordan. Hi.
Peter, how are you?
Very well, my friend. You've got me appreciating my trees more on my property already as I listened to you on the way to gym, and while I was at gym and on the way home, we're on 10 acres and there's a lot of very tall gum trees that I've always known are beautiful, and I've loved having them around, standing there like guardians watching over us. But after listening to you for an hour, I appreciate them even more. So lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, man. I don't know the Australian trees very well, but I know that, the varieties of eucalypts in Australia are very precious to the land there, as well as the old pines that are there. I think one of the oldest pines on earth is in Australia, and of course the cypresses. But I'm sure there's so many native trees in Australia I haven't met yet.
Yeah, wow. I don't know what it is, but I've always been fascinated with trees. Love them. It's one of my favorite things to do. There's a place near where we live called Condalilla Falls, and there is there's the canopy, and then coming out of the canopy is like something out of Jurassic Park, like it's way taller than everything else. This straight old kauri pine that the loggers couldn't get when they came through in the 18 whatever, and this old master made it. And I love going to look at that. It gives you
Wow.
tingles to think that it would have looked like that throughout the whole valley.
Right.
One
Right.
survived, which is beautiful
Right.
for me. I love that.
Wow. That's amazing. I think the tallest recorded trees on Earth are actually gum trees that humans have ever measured.
Ah,
And they're like crazy tall, something like 400 feet.
I,
And
I
those
got a feeling they're in Western Australia.
Well, they're not, I mean, they're not that tall anymore, right?
Yeah.
That was like the end of the 1800s when they were measured before being logged.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, but there were these measurements taken of these extremely tall trees. I think now the tallest trees we know of are giant sequoias and trees in the Amazon called cebas.
Right. Wow.
But gum trees are in there.
Yes. I feel fascinated to talk to you about trees, to be honest. But and before we start the call, one thing I will say to you is, so after, a few ayahuasca journeys, when you do all this life stuff, you start getting all these other things come through, right? And I was getting connection with earth and with tree, old wisdom, etc. So I got called to after the last ceremony, which was, I think I've done 23 nights now or something. And the last one was a tough one. Like out of all of them, I thought I've got this sorted out. And then mother's like, well, I should have known better because I set the intention to show me the truth. Holy heck, man. I didn't realize it was going to be brutal, but it was like the truth about yeah, the journey of the soul, right? The path of unconditional love. And how this links to trees is I started doing research into my lineage because I was doing a lot of lineage work on that show me the truth thing, right? About patterns in the family. And my uncle, not my father, but his brother, who's estranged a bit from the family, uh, he got interested in the family tree, let's call it. And I found out that one of my early ancestors was called a cedar baron and
Uh-huh.
would log red gold, which was the red cedar, all the way up the coast of Australia and had a particular name for this. So
But you had an ancestor that was a prominent logger.
yes, yes,
Wow, brother.
yeah. And I had a hard night on that one, right? There was a thread in this life of guilt, shame, carrying a burden, but mother took me deeper and I was like, what the heck is this? And I didn't know. I'd had the first cup and I was absolutely convinced that I'll never drink ayahuasca again for the rest of my life, right?
That's it.
And I went back to the mattress and mother said, but how are you going to know if this is just your really resistant ego or whether there's actually some big truth in here if you don't have the second cup? And I lay there and I was like in the darkness laughing, going, oh my gosh. So I got up, eyes closed, weeping, lined up, had the second cup, and out it all came this guilt and shame that, of course, came up in the bucket, which was beautiful to get rid of. But yeah, that's the link to trees. Sorry to just start our conversation. There's no point beating around the bush, hey?
Right out of the
So,
gate, man.
you know?
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That was really powerful, and I feel the I feel that thread. Yeah, I feel the thread, brother, and I feel the deep link. So I'm excited for what you're bringing.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing the truth.
Oh, listen, if there's emotional injuries that we can't speak about, then I feel like the distortion still lies within somewhere because once a distortion's been acknowledged and then, of course, felt, experienced, and then loved for what it is and what it has given us the opportunity to grow through, then I feel like we've truly honored that catalyst because it's an opportunity. We got free will, but we've truly honored that catalyst and, of course, can openly share that. And it can be a way in which, the infinite creator and the infinite creator learning through us can be spread through, I guess, being brave to tell your stories and all the things you may have that aren't perfect about yourself. I got plenty, right? I got plenty of things to.
Love it.
Anyway, anyway, nice to meet you.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know how we got connected?
No, I do not.
I think you guys had a PR agency that reached out to me in like December. And they were like, we're reaching out on behalf of Pete and Roxy and the Elevated Conversation show. And yeah, then I emailed back and they never followed up. And I actually have a tree diet coming up in Australia. And I was like, I remember that channel that got in touch with me about, and they're in Australia. And so I just emailed back and you guys responded.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, isn't this just divinely set up? I love it. Tell me, whereabouts in Australia are you going?
it'll be Mullumbimby.
Okay. That's about 3 hours from where we are. That's that's the good place to have it. That's where the plant med like if you were to ask me, do you know any shamans? They're in that area. That's where there's a real culture. That's, the alternate area of Australia where there's a lot of focus in plant medicines and healing in general. Good spot to
Right.
have it.
I have students there. We just completed a 3-month tobacco apprenticeship, and I have 4 students that did it remotely from that area. So we're going to bring a sequoia tree down for an 8-day tree diet. And it's off grid. You drink the tree for 8 days while working with purgative tobacco. Have you ever worked with tobacco?
No, I haven't. But I'm very interested. So if just for my editor, if
Yeah.
we do the intro at the end, right?
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah. Yeah.
continue on with what you're going to be doing in Australia. So bringing in the sequoia tree, the people are that, and the diet is some of the bark from the tree. Is this how that works? And in the absence of other foodstuffs, right? The person really assimilates the essence of that tree into their system, and that's what this 8 day retreat's about.
Yep. And so through the assimilation process, which I sometimes call an infusion process, because the tree pours its infusion or its bioelectrical energy into the person. And it's an interesting one because in my understanding of this practice, it comes from the field of the trees with the trunks themselves, like the actual body of the trees. It's not from the tea, it's from the trees.
Right.
And the tea that we put into our system is a way for our body to attune to the signal of the tree. So it helps us harmonize with that almost frequency, a radio frequency, and connect us to the tree, and the tree will start to transmit the energy into us. And it can happen over great distances. So it's like I have brought these northern hemisphere trees like sequoias and birches down to the Amazon, excuse me, not the Amazon, but into Peru, into the Andes. I cook tobacco in the Andes once a year. And the diets are really strong with these trees that we bring from North America down into these vortexes. And it helps people attune, and then the energy of the tree will drop through the bioweb. So it's almost like the psychic signature of the tree comes through the web that wraps the earth, and it will come to where we are, and it will enter the individuals and teach through the system. And it's very sober because we're not taking any hallucinogenic medicine. We work with tobacco to facilitate connection and to move energy through the body while we pull the energy of the tree through the system. And so it's lucid, but the tobacco is super effective at that piece that you just told me in your story about taking this intention to grandmother about seeing the truth. Tobacco is like a very refined scalpel going straight to these truth moments or truth consciousness or the truth cognition, self-realization spaces within ourselves to see what is hard for us to see. And tobacco unlocks that and then opens that space. And then in that space that's open, the tree comes through. And it starts to bloom inside the body, and it starts to grow inside the body, and it starts to teach its actual consciousness as it comes more through the system. And as tobacco unlocks little pieces, the tree comes into those pieces and starts to teach somatically. And it can be quite a range of things that it teaches. It can teach through psychic vision. It can teach through dreams. It can teach through like deep somatic power. So it works a lot on the joints. It works a lot on bone marrow. It works a lot on the inner tissue of the organs. It's a really powerful shamanic practice for the body, but it also delicately increases our psychic sensitivity and our psychic maturity because you're doing this sober.
So, does it work in a system? In other words, first it shows you areas where you might be out of alignment. Is it like a teacher plant, or do you, let's say, open up the space via the tobacco and the wisdom flows in? But when you say the wisdom or the essence of the tree, is it helping a person clear and, clear out distortions that may be in their field or areas where they might be in false?
Absolutely. Yeah. But they're nuanced, man. They
Yeah.
can get so deep into the places where there's confusion, right? There's natural human confusion, and it can resonate that confusion up and out, right? And it can be subtle. It can feel subtle at first, but you might feel the disturbance growing as it helps clarify it. So it's almost homeopathic in that way. Like it provokes things that we're carrying that feel latent or deeply repressed or ancestral, like you spoke about with your cedar baron, up to the surface. And then, of course, we can process them and release them. And then again, through the opening or the release, that's when the teaching really begins. So it's like we start with these roots. Let's pull the roots up. Let's see where they're connected to this branch. Okay, let's pull that out. And now following that thread, the energy of the medicine starts to come through. And in that, it can instruct in these other spaces, like psychic acuity or psychic clarity. It can begin to instruct in the shamanic art. So traditionally in Peru, for those who would give the grandmother vine, they would diet many plants, right? And so the plants are teaching all of these different realms of psychic ability that you would use in the healing arena where the vine would be served. And so all of the facilitation of the vine is traditionally taught through diets of many, many plants. And so there's a lot of reasons we can go to a diet. We can go for physical healing, we can go for mental and emotional healing, and we can also go for learning. And there are a lot of people at this point on the medicine path who have done a lot of healing and are continuing to heal in more and more refined areas, maybe such as yourself, moving into ancestral healing. And through that, the learning starts to get more acute and starts to get sharper, and the shamanic teachings get sharper. So yeah, the system is, in general, you bring it up, you purge and clear, and through that opening that's created, the tree can actually begin to bring wisdom through.
Wow. And I can only imagine the wisdom and the connection of the sequoia when I think of a cross section, all of those rings, right? Those rings are almost like rooms in a library of information that's like stored in this old wise, let's call it a grandmother again, right? This old wise teacher. You're tuning into all those years, like these trees are hundreds of years old. Must be amazing.
You got it. You got it. You hit it on the nose. And we work in the Sacred Tree Keepers community with a specific sequoia. So it's called the Metasequoia. And I think what you're describing, what most people think of, is the giant sequoia from Northern California that you can drive a car through, right? The Sequoia we work with is the eldest of the three sequoias on Earth. There's the giant sequoia, there's the coastal redwood that's most common in California, and then there's the Metasequoia. And the Metasequoia was thought to have gone extinct. So we knew of it from the fossil record, and we thought that it went extinct something like 60 million years ago. And it was the dominant canopy tree in the North Pole before the North Pole was a block of ice. So the North Pole used to be a series of swamps in the Jurassic period and the Cretaceous period. And so, of course, the ice came and many species went extinct. And the Metasequoia kept walking south over millions of years and was found living in China in the 1940s. And only a few hundred of them were found living. So the tree's been evolving for a few 100 million years. The genetic material we find in the living Metasequoias matches the genetic material in the fossils from 60 million years ago without changes, meaning the tree has not been evolving. The tree reached its peak evolution in the Cretaceous period and has been existing like in a bodhisattva-like state on Earth since then. Extremely rare. We don't know of species that have this type of occurrence or story. This is a very rare exception on Earth, a very rare life form. But speaking of that library and age of the tree, she is a grandmother that is ancient and very much carries a library. And when we do diets of this tree, there is a feeling that she opens up a almost like an astral library, something like an Akashic record book, and can read through pages of people's soul memories, of people's ancestral memories, and whatever is ready to be consciously processed. It's very easy for her to just be like, okay, how about this one? Let's deal with that one. And in that, there's a master level of guidance.
Yeah, wow. I reflect on the law of one and Ra talking about high second level or second density beings before they turn into third density beings, getting an ego and a consciousness and needing to go through the choosing. Are we service to self or are we service to others? And they talk about the selflessness of the tree embodying the one infinite creator, unconditional love, infinite service, and the role it plays in, let's call it the atmosphere, the cleaning of the air, all the way down to, a home for the animals, furthering down into the network under the ground of nourishing the earth and selflessly giving, bringing that term, the biosphere, all into balance as it's like a pillar. But it does it with this unconditional love, even to the point where if a person is to chop it down, cut it down for whatever reason, still in its biodegrading into the earth, it's providing fertilizer, nourishment, dropping the seeds. And I thought, what a beautiful and selfless way for unconditional love to be expressed. Because the pattern I've had through working with so many people is so many of us come in as a soul to experience unconditional love. And very often the way we get the opportunity to experience unconditional love through our life is through situations where we experience the opposite of unconditional love all the way through our life. And as you talk about, the more you go in, the more I love the term you to describe for tobacco, the scalpel of the nuanced cleaning, the more you can go into the energies of, let's go to the root chakra just to start. If you really go in there, you can perhaps work out whether you're wanted or not wanted before you were even born, which I picked up on in my mother's womb,
Yep.
You can
Yep.
pick up all of that information is stored in the field, in the record, and if you go in galactic, Roxy and I talk about it's in the Akashic field or it's in the quantum, but I'm sure because as we've passed away many, many times in the water, in the lands or different continents, rotted into the earth and become the nutrients for these beautiful, knowledgeable sponges. It's stored there in the library. We get access to it if the vessel is open and connected in. Am I sort of on the right track there with the unconditional love link?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I mean, I think that there's a very deep reason that trees are the sigils and crests at the heart of religions all over the world, right?
Mm.
That's that the tree of life is a globally human concept. It's not particular to this or that myth or this or that culture, and you see it through indigenous cultures to cultures that are quote civilized, and religions that are considered major world religions. You see the motif of the tree being not just the bridge but the door, and not just the door but the guide or the teacher or the embodiment of the creator. And I find that, as I walk this path more deeply of dieting, and I've spent years dieting trees and have dedicated my life to it. But the more I share it with others, the more I see that these are not myths. They're analogies, yes. They're ways of record keeping our relationship from the time that we were perhaps primates evolving in under the stewardship of trees and the guardianship of trees. Really, as a species, they're crucial to our evolution as people. And in that way, they're guardians and benevolent stewards of humanity, just as much as they're guardians and benevolent stewards of forests and all the biomes on Earth. So they're evolutionary masters. And in that, they do not fear death, because what is there to fear? It is completely, as you said, circling back on itself and feeding. And yes, spirit is infusing through, but the death of the body is not real in a sense. And I think trees do teach that. And equally, the path that we walk with them is an initiatory path. So for many of us, it's very hard to separate the intellectual knowing that yes, we will die, and that perhaps matter and our relationship to matter is illusory, with the emotional experience of feeling no fear or feeling peace about that. Right? And I think we're on various points of a spectrum in that. But the trees teach through initiation into our deepest portals of fear and resistance. And I don't know if there really is another way. It's the way of initiating and coming to new layers of our consciousness, right? And so that is when we work these energies through our body, the trees will take us into the places. Sometimes the diets can be like that. Sometimes they can be very blissful, or just full physical power, where you come out with 100% charged chi. But many times it can take us into initiation, where the experience is so overwhelming and so uncomfortable. But we're alchemizing and we're pulling things out that are very deep in our soil. As you said, maybe memories of being unwanted that we're carrying in our body, or things that our ancestors did that we're still carrying in our body because they were never addressed. And it's actually causing suffering, potentially in the physical. And then we burn it. We burn it in an 8-day experience, in an 8-day master tree diet. And it accelerates your karma. I don't know how else to put it. It makes the wheel spin faster. And you have this opportunity to break very, very deep attachments and very, very deep patterns and actually be free of them and change yourself in that way. And the ask from spirit through that teaching and the ask from trees for that teaching is an absolute willingness and an absolute devotion to self-sovereignty and to our responsibility to show up and pilot this thing while we're here in this form.
It's it'd be a massive challenge for people, because I'm sure for a lot of people, they're just dealing with life, day to day. So often I speak to people, they're like, oh yeah, that all sounds good, but why would I want to go there and look at myself, or, think about things from that happened earlier in my life, for example, instead of just getting on with it, sucking up and getting on with it. So this message, even when your beautiful point about the fear, so many people fear death. Okay. I mean, while we mightn't be looking for death, the fear of death comes from the false belief of being separate from source. Well, that's a distortion in consciousness, because once you understand all is one and one is the all, and you feel you're connected to everything, the example of the tree, the example of Jesus saying, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do, when he's getting dragged up to the cross, right? Yeah, yeah, amazing. And, Mother Ayahuasca even showed me, that was an evolution. There were times when he walked into the temple and they were trading and gambling, and Jesus would kick over the over the tables and drag them out, and got angry. Well, hadn't got to that point where it was ready to go, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. It's human. It's consciousness evolves. We can aspire to know ourselves better. And for a lot of the people watching this, they'll sort of know what we're talking about, but in, I think, day-to-day terms, there can be a lot of different catalysts that inspire people to go on this journey. I know yours, you had physical health conditions that you wanted to work on. There could be a lot of people who might have feelings of unfulfillment, and a greater questioning. For others, it's more nuanced. There's depression, there's anxiety, there is some sort of other imbalance in their field. They're looking for answers and they want a natural solution, not a pharmaceutical solution. And then they come across work such as yourselves. Now, while this information, and this is a lot of the people who will be watching this know what we're talking about, I'm loving how what you're sharing is becoming more mainstream. This is another thing I got in my most recent plant medicine, was when I asked Mother, how are we going to share the message and talk more about relationships being, free flowing, because she was showing me the whole world's hooked on energy exchange, I'll do this for you, but you've got to do that for me. She says, like, everywhere. It's not unity, there's not oneness, because I asked about the truth, and it was like, this is what was getting shown. And she said, the way you're going to do it is through this. And I get this image come to me of a Trojan horse, right? I got the Trojan horse. I was like, oh, I love this. So then I get the beautiful Trojan horse, which relates exactly to your work, Jordan. Avatar and the sacred tree of Avatar, which I couldn't help but wonder if that was inspired by the tree of life or the Bodhi tree, because that beautiful tree, right? The keeper of wisdom, the connection to the sacred. It was a vehicle to connect to the ancestors. It provided their home. It was, right, providing shade and etc. for everything else around it. And the fruits were edible and all the things, right? And they could connect in with their tail. And like the wisdom, and Mother was saying, nature always finds a way. Right? Nature finds a way. So I've just had this moment where I just felt like I loved the work that you were doing, and I wanted to acknowledge it, because, it's like when you know, I say it to Roxy. So we do interviews and sometimes you get someone and you're like, oh, I just love what they're sharing. Um, how do you, first of all, how do you feel like I'm going there with that comparison of, right, the Trojan horse, Avatar, and people having more appreciation for trees? Because I'm sure after that movie, there are a lot more people who are inclined to want to go outside and hug a tree or feel a connection to a special grand tree.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I want to say is that that depiction in Avatar, so the Trojan horse piece is a bit of the way that we think of symbols and stories in general. We think of things as fantasy, myth, this other realm which doesn't quite exist, but gives us great emotional feeling, right? It gives us great excitement to envision
Yes.
things this way. Through adept shamanic practice that is grounded in reality, meaning in this meat suit, in this beautiful temple that we live in, that we need to take care of, that is somatic and real. We need to ground our shamanic experience in plain care of the body, right? We have to take care of this body. When you're able to do that first, you can begin to understand through practice and experience that these stories are not symbols, they're maps to something that we remember how to do that's very, very, very old. It's very old. And when we look around, we don't see it to our left and our right. We don't see people walking around in these body temples practicing this. It's not in our culture in the world anymore. So there are little pockets where it is, primarily in indigenous cultures, right? But you can't walk down the streets in Sydney or in LA where I am right now and see this happening. So yes, Trojan horse through story, sure, but that's a roadmap. And the trick is to realize that it's a map to something real and not a fiction. Yes, there's a fiction going on, there's a story going on that is a fiction, but that fiction is a map. So when we diet trees, that is Avatar in real life. Are you going to fly around? No. Are you going to turn blue and grow a tail? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what they're depicting, the map that they're depicting in this story that is a Trojan horse, getting the map out into the collective. The tree of life is a concept or an archetype, but it comes through any of the master trees that we diet. And it is like interfacing with source through form. So maybe you can talk about it as like a direct channel to connecting to source, but in a way that is integratable, that feeds your life both in that mystical place, but also in that daily place. And that's what the tree of life represents. You can eat its fruit, but you can also plug in and connect to the ancestors who are not in this embodied realm anymore. So it feeds your body, it feeds your mind, your spirit, your soul, right? And it sometimes in great mystical experience, but also in great experience that is day to day, that is pragmatic, that is down to earth. And that's the spectrum that we cover and feel in a tree diet. It's very earthy and humble and sober and lucid. Then it's extremely deep, where there are cognitive shifts that don't make a sense because you're not under the influence of some kind of psychedelic where you can be like, yeah, of course I felt that. I drank ayahuasca, or I took a mushroom, or this or that. And that, when you have these very deep portals of spiritual experience while you're so lucid and so grounded, that will permanently affect your cognition. It will change your mind, and it will change the way you see reality. And that right there, as I have witnessed it in many people, it's starting to open people's psychic capacity.
Mm. So it's
Um,
like, in a way, a facilitator to help them to connect back to what the connection that was already there, as you said, very ancient, remembering, and a vehicle. Um, there's lots of different ways, right, for us to be able to connect. But with this particular beautiful modality, I love the fact that people are lucid through it, because through being lucid, you get the spiritual or karmic understanding. So the being learns the lesson clearly, doesn't get lost in the psychedelics and the emotion and the sweat and the etc. Because the better we get the karmic lesson of why we came in and attracted the distortion to ourselves in the first place, even if it wasn't our fault, it happened and the soul chose it before it came in because there's a particular lesson for the soul to learn and experience and grow through if we choose, because we got free will. But through getting that lucidly, I feel would be very valuable, because the more nuanced the understanding, the more, let me use the term, spiritual intelligent we become in know thyself, love thyself, and forgive and accept it all. And then see the infinite creator in everything, how we fit into that beautiful pattern of life, right? Which is one and unity. But that's a process, you're right. You're like, you've got to work to that level, right? Because sometimes it's hard to, particularly with spiritual bypassing and the spiritual ego, right? It can trip us up. Hence, I
yes.
love what you mentioned earlier in the chat. Sometimes we can spiral around for many, many lifetimes in a cycle before we have a leap in the ascension spiral into that next level. And what I love from it, sounds like your work gives a person the opportunity, if they choose to do it, is that they can break themselves out of a cycle that they may not even know they're in.
That's right.
Yeah. It's like often we know the cycles. God, I always attract the wrong man, or I always attract a difficult business partner, or I always attract a nasty neighbor, or, crashes in my car, or problems in my body. Oh my goodness, I must have a pattern. Beautiful, great. Start working on that. If you do the work, you're going to find out what that pattern's linked to. There's something there. But the tricky ones are the ones you don't even know you got, right? It's like, I think
Yep.
everything's good. And it sounds like this nuance, the scalpel, I love that word. The scalpel that's nuanced, like the specialist. It's like you got to go to the next level. You get the specialist in, and they go, oh, actually, this and this and this and this as well. So this is the beauty of consciously being aware of what the medicine is showing you. And I'm sure there is a free will element in here. I presume that. I haven't heard you say that, but it's like you see it and then you choose to remove it. And then, of course, and I hope this is in line, and I'm not just presuming, but then the proof's in the pudding. One thing to be shown and to have the knowing of I'm all inspired, but then the next time someone cuts you off in traffic, you're not going to be on the horn and going arsehole out the window, right? If you've just had a beautiful session on unconditional love and all is one, and we decide how we're going to respond versus react, et cetera, et cetera. So then making the choice in our day-to-day life is taking the experience and putting it into action, so that we've made let's call it a vibrational shift. We move to a new timeline. We move into the golden age, or all the different things people talk about. I'm moving more towards ascension, connecting more with my higher self. They're all terms pointing to the similar wisdom. Have you noticed this in your work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot. Sorry, but yeah, it's like,
Oh, please. Yeah. Bring it.
right?
So you connected back to tobacco because I was talking about the
Yeah.
scalp in relation to
Mm,
tobacco, right? And it's interesting because you were talking about before you brought in the scalpel, you were talking about these greater cycles that we might not be aware of, and that this way of working gives you an opportunity to break or evolve from cycles that are deeply unconscious or even pre-conscious, We might have no symbols of them, like no way to access them cognitively. We don't even have stories about them. So they live very deeply in a place where we don't have any somatic access. We don't feel them even in our body as a conscious form where we're like, my elbow hurts, right? Like that's a sensation that can lead us in, and it's a thread that can guide us into the body to do inner work. So the deeper patterns are cordoned off almost. They're in totally fractured out, disconnected spaces that live within us. And so getting back to that and replugging our circuitry back into these spaces is initiatory. And this is what I was speaking about around initiation, where we can be brought into experiences that are very uncomfortable. The discomfort comes, I legitimately believe that it comes from actual nerve endings turning back on that have gone offline. So things that we're holding in our system, where our system's legitimately shut down and has been like, I'm just going to store that there and go dark so I can survive and keep going. And it's an animal body, right? It's part of this temple technology. So let me turn it back on. Now, when you turn it back on, it could feel like you're experiencing hell on earth while your system actually starts to wake up, and it could feel traumatic. And it's partially your body re-experiencing whatever was stored there all at once, which your cognition, your psyche was not prepared to experience whenever it happened. And so you're carrying that load in a part of you that's turned off. It's like, yeah, my left rib cage has become a locker, right? And so the nerves are not firing there. The tissue is actually not moving fluidly. And it's not being controlled with locomotion. So it actually becomes a part of your body that is fully disassociated. All of us have this to varying degrees. Some people in very extreme ways. When you come do this full spectrum medicine, tree diets, master tree diets, they work so deeply on your tissue. Tobacco works very deeply on your tissue. It's going to plug your cognition back into those nerve endings that are connected to that tissue, and that tissue is going to turn back online. That can feel very bad at first, but it's going to feel like an immense amount of life force, like power. People describe it as electrical power. And then what will sometimes happen, it's that same analogy of Christ talking about a camel trying to get through the eye of the needle. It can feel like you can't get through the opening. And that's ego and belief and attachment and story. And so this is where self-sovereignty comes in. And this is where this work is for one type of person and one type of person only. This work is effective only for people who are ready to embrace every single thing going on inside their being and to take responsibility for it. Not to say that they caused it, not to say that they didn't have things perpetrated on them, not to say that they've never been victims of X, Y, or Z, but that they're going to take responsibility for amending, repairing, restoring harmony from any damage that has been done by themselves or by others to them, and that lives within them. It's full self-sovereignty, full radical ownership. Then the initiations proceed. And so you'll be given the medicine that you need to shed the parts of the ego that will allow you to make this passageway. When you make these passageways, it is like threading this needle. And that's where cycles can break, like radical cycles can break. And so you're like, well, okay, there's addictive patterns. I have that addiction, that addiction, that addiction, that addiction. Some of them not so extreme. And I've dealt with the extreme ones. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. This is me, by the way. Like, this is my map. I'm not an alcoholic anymore, but I was waking up in gutters in China. I'm not a drug addict anymore, but I've had multiple overdoses from pharmaceutical opiates. I'm not a sex addict anymore, but there were years where I was out of control. And I was burning my life down. And then it goes into the finer grained things. spending money on this or that, shopping, online
Mm.
shopping, looking at pictures of women, the very finer things, just scrolling on the phone, X, Y, or Z, right? And so you start working all these things out and you go like, okay, I dealt with the pattern. No, you dealt with loops. They're little loops that spiral down, right, to these less granular things, coarse to granular. And at the heart of that, there's a deeper wound that we don't have access to. We have access to it through all these coping mechanisms. When you do the diets, the core of the wound will emerge. And you need a guide in this because it can radically overwhelm the consciousness. And it can make you feel like you need to check out. But when it's well grounded and you have somebody with you who can help you ground it, essentially you can breathe through it. And it feels like a birth. And it's like going into the core of the pain that you're using all these different things to try and escape. The
Right.
pain, you might not have any story for why it's there. You might not even be able to attach a story to it. Like, yeah, that was pain from being in the womb and really realizing that my mother didn't want me but birthed me anyway. It may not have a logic or a story. You may end up with the only story being of the initiation that you went through and the pain that you transmuted without knowing why. But the power that comes on the back end of that, and this is, in my opinion, is the purpose. It's not necessarily so that we don't call the guy an asshole who cut us off in traffic. We're still animals, right? We are. Like, yes, let's make the world a cleaner place. But in my opinion, the purpose of this is so that we can serve creation with more power and more beauty. That we can create better things that bring harmony in this world with systems, with actual ways of being, so that we don't destroy forests, so that we don't poison our water, so that we don't leave a mess for our children. And how do we do that? Like, we essentially have to transmute the pain we're carrying, because that's what we're acting out of.
Mm. So you're saying it's okay to give the finger to the guy in the traffic and yell at him, or you wouldn't focus on that? Or
It's like no, it's not that it's okay. It's more like, well, actually, if we do it, yeah, there's forgiveness, right? At some level, it's okay. It's that what I would focus on, are the ways that we are self-destructing out of pain. And the way that that is preventing us from being able to create art, our own way of making beauty, new systems, new technologies, new types of communities and relations, new ways of our stewardship of the land. Essentially ways that our pain is restricting us from creating freely and beautifully. That's the point I would focus on. Because as long as we're acting out of pain, we're going to do all kinds of things. We're going to call the guy an asshole, but we're also going to keep dumping mercury into the water, right? And it's like, this is what we're dealing with.
Mm. Yeah, it's applying it in day-to-day life, right? Because not everyone's going to go out and start new agricultural practices or invent new water filters or blah blah, right? But they're going to go to, your 8-day workshop, and they're going to apply this to themselves and work through things and raise their vibration, because they're going to know thyself. They're going to clear the distortions, the patterns, right? The addictions linked to the false belief of I'm not enough. So therefore I need to find something outside myself because I'm inherently lacking in something. Those like false beliefs that we can hold, that cut to the core, right? They're the things, right? So, and then of course we sacral solar plexus chakra try and solve that by playing a role in a facade to mask the stuff that's down in our root chakra, not wanted, sacral chakra. I'm lacking in something. You get the like. There's all of that. In the day to day, though, someone's still going to go walk into the office and etc. And the way that we can fertilize the soil, purify the water, and etc., I really feel is through the energy that we carry, because there is that saying, by their works you shall know them,
Sure.
by their works. So the more loving, peaceful, forgiving, kind, understanding, and etc. we can be in without, let's call it personal development. I'm thinking negative, but hang on a sec. If I write affirmations every morning and look in the mirror and sharpen myself up and tell myself things over and over, I might be able to force myself to be more positive. And of course, positive thinking works. Motivators have been talking about it. But what I feel would be a lot better is being positive rather than needing to think positive. It's like our innate nature, the real essence of us naturally coming out. So to link this back to the guy in traffic, when the distortions in yourself are, let's call it, soothed and at ease and understood and seen, the person pops in, you think, gosh, this guy must be in a hurry. I should let them in. And you eat off, let the person in. And because you're not taking it as not respected, not seen, someone else, like the reason
True.
a person gets triggered is because in them is, I'm not important. This person thinks they're more important than me, or they're reacting to pushy person in their life, right? So
True.
when you're in unity and beingness, be like the water, right? You cruise along and things don't affect you as much. And if you do honk the horn and get pissed off, what's the most important thing is how you then decide to look on that and what that means to you. If you go, oh, I did it.
Yep.
It's the first time this year, though. I've been doing pretty well, right? I remember I used to do that all the time, and I would have called him way worse words. Oh well, I did it, but and I've been doing well this year. Like, hoping to get to where he needs to be. You just catch it, forgive yourself, right, and move on. But to take these beautiful concepts that you're talking about and then apply them in our everyday life, I feel is often the challenge for people, but it needn't be that complicated, right?
Mm.
When I just explain it like that, you see the point. And it's like when someone's late for an appointment or, etc., what we go to in that is a reflection of what's going on in us. If we're sitting there going, where the hell are they? Far out. This is the second time they've been late. Da 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 da. Well, still buried in us is disrespect, not honored, or some distortion. If you go to, goodness me, I hope they're all right.
Yep. Yep.
God, I hope they didn't have a car accident. I hope they didn't blah, 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 blah. Well, that's bringing up another thing of the worst thing that could possibly happen, fear, and that person might go too extreme that way, right? Or you can be, oh, they're not here yet. I guess they won't mind if I order a cup of tea first. You order a cup of tea and you sit and you wait and you handle it or you message. But the degree to which we respond is a reflection of how healed we are, like within ourselves. So doing the inner work, particularly consciously with what it sounds like your program is helping people to do, is to see all of those, like those little distortions, they're real things, right?
Yeah.
They're in the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, right? Which are like the root of the tree. And then our top four chakras, I'm sure. This is where we branch out into the branches. Hoping this is right. I'm feeling like that through our expression, right? Particularly, right, with the throat chakra, and we're expressing that out. So as you go through that process of being guided by the master teacher plants, and I mean the tree, just to me, I love the thought. We talked about this at the start. I love trees. It's like that link to that. I feel it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I got a question for people who'd be watching this and they're interested. What does a day look like on an 8-day master tree diet learning retreat? Like you wake up, what are you doing? Like how does the day pass? Can I please ask that?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, thank you for that teaching, Pete. That was a beautiful teaching about integrated self-sovereignty and taking ownership over everything that's in our vessel and the way that we project it onto others when we're in states of negativity and we're not owning it within ourselves, right? And it slips out onto others and we project it out into the world, and that creates chaos and disharmony. So thank you for the teaching of like
Oh,
completeness around that and nuance and
thank you.
refinement. Yeah, I felt your practice. I was really feeling your inner work and your transmission. So super important. Yeah, that level of completeness and integration into daily life and the respect that we hold for ourselves and for each other. What do we do on an 8-day tree diet?
I'm thinking
Well,
you wake up in the morning, you're probably hungry. It's like,
we
what's
eat a
for
little.
breakfast?
We
Tea?
we eat tobacco. We have tobacco first thing in the morning. So, and we work with, well, I'll preface this by saying the tobacco is the aspect of a master tree diet that I adjust most for different people because everybody's system needs a different relation to tobacco. It's nuanced per person. So there are people I don't give any tobacco to. There are people I give very little tobacco to. There are people I give tobacco to with one form and not the other. And there are people who I give the full bore initiatory tobacco to. But the general structure is thus. We wake up around 7 a.m. We have liquid tobacco through the sinuses like a neti pot,
I've
right? And
never
you
heard
spit
of
it.
that term. Liquid tobacco through what's how do you say it? Neti?
Well, a neti pot is from Vedic medicine, and it's where you take salt water and pour it through the sinuses, and you spit it out the mouth.
Wow.
It's a sinus flush. So we
Wow.
flush the sinuses and the sinus canal with tobacco,
Yeah.
and it clears phlegm out of the face, opens the blood vessels in the eyes, sharpens the eyes, and it really begins to open and pull extra head energy out. So it's a great way to start the day with a diet because it kind of clears you of ways that excessive thinking and spiraling in the head can block your connectivity.
Right.
So pretty effective way to start the day each day. Then about 10 a.m. we eat saltless oatmeal, monk food. It's very plain, but it's enough to sustain the body. Right in the afternoon, around 12 or 1, we sit and we breathe for about an hour in a primordial breath lineage. It's a Taoist lineage of working through the gates, as you described them, the chakras, up the spine. It's a super helpful modality for processing the plant medicine so that you have volition and sovereignty and some control over your experience. So we do that every day. And then about 4 p.m., we eat some saltless, spiceless, oilless vegetable soup with some quinoa or some rice. And then at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., somewhere in the evening, when the sun is down, we gather in circle one more time and we eat tobacco paste into the stomach. So that helps ground the diet into the body. It opens the ducts and the channels of the liver and allows the tree medicine to integrate through the system. It's a very ancient practice to combine tree medicine with some form of internally ingested tobacco. Rape is, in the old way, a form of tree medicine because you take half ash of a medicine tree and half tobacco powder or dust, and you combine the two together, and the tobacco activates with the tree medicine, literally it chemically activates and then delivers the tree medicine into the body. So that's rape. That's a traditional
Wow.
form of rape. It's a
I'm,
form of
I, yeah, I do have a practice with rapé since the ayahuasca experiences, and I'd never heard it explained like that. But Love it. Beautiful.
We do that inside the cauldron of the belly, right? So we drink the tea of the tree. That is given in the morning when we have the sinus flush with tobacco, and
Yes.
you have about a liter of it you can drink throughout the day. And so the forms of tobacco that we take help that medicine stay active in the digestive cauldron or in the solar plexus, as the tobacco is consistently activating the ducts of the liver. So it is a deep medicine process that's very physical. And then throughout that time, you can chill. You know, people rest, people walk. We do this on beautiful land. So it's restorative. You're not on your phone. There's no screens. There's no contact outside of the container. There's no speaking. It's noble silence unless there's a kind of check-ins with facilitators just to make sure everybody's on track and that, you know, we do a little bit of one-on-one processing, but it's in noble silence. So we don't do group drop-ins. You're really with your experience. We don't do integration circles inside the diet. We do that after. There's a 6-week integration container after the tree diet where we do some group calls and we have a group community portal online. And that's super healing because we have a very active community with sacred tree keepers. So there's people from outside of the diet that can interact who have done a lot of tree diets, and it's a mature community. But during the diet, it's noble silence. So you can read, you can write, you can sing, you can make sound that way. You can play instruments, you can get in a hammock and go to sleep, you can meditate and breathe, you can have a little walk, you can do yoga. But by and large, you're in passive time, staying in very low gear ratio. You're in first gear the whole time, just allowing the plant to vegetate within your body while you nourish and stay relaxed. It's really healing time for a lot of people.
Wow. So when are you coming to Australia? Let's talk about your details and your dates.
Let me look. I think it's September 11th to 19th. I just got the dates last night.
Okay.
September 11th to 19th.
September 11th to 19th. And it's was it Murwillumbah, you were saying?
Mullumbimby.
Mullumbimby. Mullumbimby. That's not too far away anyway.
And it'll be camped on wilderness land that's stewarded by some amazing people. And it backs up to the national park there, I'm fairly certain, and it's absolutely stunning. There's a river running through it, and we will be dieting Metasequoia, Yawanale. It's the grandmother, eldest of the sequoias, and she's a dragon tree. She teaches a very high art of healing, of sight, of spiritual sight, of long vision down one spiritual path of devotion. She is a true master, and she is the one that I carry around the world if I'm not going to a place where the trees grow. Like I go to many places where there are oaks, right? And we diet the local oaks. Or I go to many places where there are white and silver birches and we diet the local birches. But I will carry the bark of Metasequoia around the world to many places because she is a tree that, like the grandmother vine, she is a tree that has great teaching for our time. So that's what we'll be dieting. And everybody will be in their own camp spaces, and then we will meet in a central space once per day, or multiple times per day, excuse me, to do the work together in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening.
And when you say the work, what do you mean by the work?
So going back to what a day looks like.
Just the different, yeah, okay.
Sinus flush.
Gotcha.
Hour or so of breathing, and then at night we do a circle of eating tobacco, and it's musical. You know, I do a lot of chanting from my lineage. There's a lot of songs. People in the community sing. my guardians and people, facilitators I bring with me sing. And so that happens every night.
Right, right. Because I think on a webinar of yours that I looked at before, I saw a tapestry of the Shipibo people, perhaps, on the
Yeah.
back wall. Is that a place that you visited, or you'd studied, or you're familiar with their work?
Yeah, I mean, I studied in the Amazon some. My lineage is not orthodox. I have studied in the Amazon with a Kokama lineage, and I've studied with an Apache elder.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's northern Mexico, southern Arizona, New Mexico. And they're primarily a Sundance peyote people, but I didn't train their shamanic techniques. I trained tree dieting, which I learned from the Amazon, with northern hemisphere trees. So I started developing the relationships with oaks and birches and sequoias and other trees. You mentioned the Bodhi tree. I've dieted that for 3 months.
Wow.
And I was doing all of that work under the wing of this Apache elder who wasn't teaching me the techniques. He wasn't teaching me the relationships with the trees. He was helping me stay spiritually sober while I underwent this process of deep self-teaching in the wildernesses of the United States.
Mm.
And I would come back online and meet him, and he would check me throughout the year. And that went on for about 7 years. So the lineage that the Apache hold goes back to the Siberian shamans. The closest relative of Apache is it's a language called Ket, and it's in central Siberia, and it's the living ancestor of the ancient Altaic Siberian languages where the word shaman comes from. It's a very deep world root language, and they say the tree of life concept comes from there as well. So I say that we work in a tree of life lineage.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that. Well, Jordan, listen, it's lovely to meet you. I've enjoyed our chat, and thank you for the work that you're doing too, around the world, all of us leaving our little droplets of consciousness. I love that saying, the rising tide lifts all of the boats. And the work that you're doing with those individual souls and your passion and your commitment comes through in what you do. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to have you on Elevated Conversations. Thanks for coming along for the talk.
Thank you, Pete. It's a pleasure to be with you. I really appreciated your depth of insight, clarity, and also your scalpel. So,
Uh, Thank you very much, brother. Thank you. And we'll put the links to your retreat, your dates, the website, etc., in the show notes. And good on you,
bless
mate.
Pete.
Bye.